Hey, hello there. Welcome to the next tour. Today we are on episode 4, Transition and TRICARE. So I'm Ian,
And I'm Andia.
and yeah, let's get started. I think this is going to be a big topic today. So Andia, over
I
to you.
think so too. So we're super happy to have one of my great friends, Lila Quintiliani, here with us today. So Lila has been married for 28 years. Her spouse has been in just shy of 29 years. I think in March, he hits 29. And she herself spent 3 years on active duty. I asked her when she transitioned. She said, a long time ago. LOL. So that was your answer. So I wrote that down. Um, and they're expecting her spouse's transition in about 2 years. So Lila is the program director of financial and benefits education counseling at the Military Officers Association of America, or MOAA. So we will probably call it MOAA most of the time because it's easier. But welcome, Lila. We're super happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. So yeah, MOA, we're big fans, of course, and they do such wonderful things for us while we're in uniform, and of course while we're out and following in that next chapter. But let's go ahead and dive right in because TRICARE, it's a big topic. There's a lot to be unpacked, and I think we're really only going to get to be able to scratch the surface today. Otherwise, I'm sure we could be on here in perpetuity talking about healthcare. But okay, so first question to you, Lila, is so understanding there are eligibility requirements for coverage under TRICARE for both those separating and retiring for service members and families. What are some of the most common questions that you tend to answer as folks inquire to you about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people just aren't sure how it's going to work. A lot of people have been using TRICARE Prime and have been being seen at a military treatment facility, and they just have no concept of how to how to use TRICARE other than the way they're used to using it. And in most areas, in this area, in the National Capital Region, some of the military treatment facilities can accept retirees and their dependents, but in a lot of instances they can't. And so you have to get used to pretty quickly the intricacies of how to use TRICARE. And so those are a lot of the questions we get, just how to use it. There's different costs, there's different cost shares, different premiums, et cetera. And then for the folks that are Guard and Reserve, they also have different choices as well. And then folks are also trying to evaluate their employer's insurance plan versus using TRICARE. So you really have to understand both of them to be able to make a good decision. And then, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, the folks that are getting to be 65, they really don't understand at all what happens to their healthcare insurance. So I would say I would say about 75% of the questions I answer at MOA are TRICARE related, healthcare related.
Yeah, wow, that's huge. I mean, I think that just really underscores the importance of really getting a handle on it, before you've already transitioned and really being able to understand what questions to ask. So I appreciate you flagging that. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that like we used Prime. I mean, we were exactly your example there, right? We used Prime the entire time that Ian was on active duty. I do have a lot of friends that have switched to using Select, even on active duty. So, but I know there's differences between Select when you're on active duty and Select like in retired status. So can you just talk about like maybe a little bit of those differences?
Yeah, the main difference is cost. Um, and confusingly, I think it was the 2018 NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that broke people into two. It might have been the 2017 NDAA, one of the two, but one of those National Defense Authorization Acts did split folks into two different groups depending on the year that they enlisted or the year that they entered the military. So there's Group A and Group B. Group A is those folks before 2018, and Group B is those folks after. and the costs are different for the two groups. And then the out-of-pocket costs are, of course, greater when you're a retiree, whether you're using Prime or using Select. And the catastrophic cap for Select is quite a bit higher, and it goes up each year with with inflation, with COLA. The catastrophic cap for Select. That's the big difference, I would say, is the catastrophic cap is much higher. And there's not a big difference in deductibles between Select on active duty and Select as a retiree. It's really the catastrophic cap. The difference I'm trying to pull up because it changes each year, and we're just now into January, so I'm pulling up this year's catastrophic cap for TRICARE Select. Now for active duty, it's $1,000, but for retirees, this year it is for Group A, those folks who came in before 2018, it's $4,261. So that's a big difference between the two. And then for Prime, it's $3,000 for retirees. So that's really the main difference. But so the costs are the main difference, the cost shares and the catastrophic cap.
Right. And understanding those differences and being financially prepared for them, I think is really important, an important part of transition, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's great that a catastrophic cap, a good way to look at it is you could divide that by 12 and kind of set that aside each month. And then that would be a good way to kind of plan for all the eventualities, because theoretically, once you've hit your catastrophic cap, as long as you are using a TRICARE authorized provider and you're getting a TRICARE authorized service or procedure, then you really wouldn't see anything more out of pocket. You hit that cap and then you don't pay anything else. So that's amazing. I mean, yeah.
Especially for anybody going through like major treatments or a major surgery or something.
For sure. And I think and maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit, but when you're doing kind of comparisons, I think a lot of people get shocked when they look at civilian healthcare plans and what their cost shares, deductibles, and deductible is the amount you pay out of pocket before TRICARE or your insurance plan starts paying. And with TRICARE, it's pretty low. For Select, it's $300 for a family. So those are the big differences, looking at that, comparing apples to apples. So even though that catastrophic cap sounds really high when you've been used to $1,000 cap, if you've been on active duty, it's not so high when you compare it to many civilian plans.
Yeah, so that is a great segue, because that's exactly what my next question is, which is considering, like, let's take Ian, for example. He works for the government. He has, a plan that he could elect, an employee-sponsored plan. There's also private. I work for such a small company who actually don't have employee-sponsored healthcare plan, but there are many others out there, right? So what are the things families, service members should consider when they are faced with this offer of this employee-sponsored plan? I'll get there. Employee-sponsored healthcare plan, and I do know how TRICARE fits into that because they are secondary payers. So I just wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about that, and I know you were getting us there already.
Yeah, I mean, I encounter a lot of folks that are making that decision, and I mean, I encourage them to do what I mentioned before, is kind of compare apples to apples, because you'd have to really do a deep dive into your employer's plan to understand how it works. So are they making you pay a premium? A lot of companies actually pay that premium for you, so that could be a savings. But then you want to get down and look at whether there's a deductible. A lot of these are high deductible plans that have a few $1,000s out of pocket before they kick in. That's a big difference. A lot of plans have significant copays and cost shares. And TRICARE, there is a pretty neat a sheet that TRICARE produces every year. I maybe should have dropped a link to that, or maybe you can add the link.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it changes every year. But this year they were actually quite proactive and put it out a couple months ago. Every year when the new premiums get announced in the late fall, usually it's a November-ish time frame, they have the cost sheet for the next year. So we have the 2025 cost sheet. So you could really look at that and say, oh, this is what my cost shares would be. And then, of course, knowing that catastrophic cap. With some civilian companies, it's a lot higher. However, I do caution folks that if you have, as I know you do, because I do, children that are about to age out of TRICARE, this is a big shock to folks. But when your kid turns 23, even if they still are a full-time student at 23, they lose their TRICARE coverage. And this is
this is a shock to people. Yes. There are so many people I talk to that
don't realize
it's 26.
Yes.
And I have to tell them, no, it's 23. And after 21, you have to start proving too that they're in school. Yeah.
Yes. And this is like, MOAA is an advocacy organization. So this is one of our advocacy priorities and has been for many years. This is a terrible oversight. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, TRICARE is not a health insurance company. So it was, it's not insurance really. It's a health plan. It was deemed to meet all the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. So it did not have to meet those requirements to cover kids up to age 26. But every other plan out there does have to do that, including the federal employee health benefit plan that civilian, GS employees get. So I have had So I've had members that, I had one member, if you've looked, and I would also tell you to look at the TRICARE young adult costs, because there is a premium-based insurance plan that you can get as a military retiree or active duty military to cover your kids in those gap years where they're not covered by TRICARE before they turn 26. But because it is by law, it has to pay for itself. It's a premium-based plan. So you would be shocked at how high the costs are for that plan. In fact, I'm going to pull it up now and look at it and tell you.
I want to say it was, I'm excited for you to tell me, because I thought it was around like $500 a month, but I'm excited for you to.
Well, it's actually, this is one of the weird things where it's higher to be on Prime than it is Select. And I almost never advise folks to be on TRICARE Young Adult Prime because it is so much out of pocket. But and I know a friend of mine has done a deep dive into the cost analysis, Kate Horrell, and she's pretty much mathed it out, and it's never beneficial really to be on TRICARE Young Adult Prime, because the monthly premium for TRICARE Young Adult Prime is $727.
Wow.
And it's $337 for TRICARE Young Adult Select. But I did,
I was averaging the two. But that's still wow. Yeah.
And so I had a member call me once, and she had 3 kids that were all in that gap between 23 and 26. And she was paying for Prime for all of them, but she was about to take a GS job with the government. And I said to her, you might want to look at carrying that insurance, because they would cover your kids. Right. So that's a big consideration. And remember that you don't necessarily, yes, TRICARE would always be your secondary. You don't have to actually be enrolled in TRICARE if you don't want to be. So if you didn't, but there, if there is you might not want to pay to be enrolled in Prime, but you could have Select as your secondary. Okay. And then the other option to consider is, and I didn't really bring this up before, but a lot of folks are eligible for VA healthcare. So that's totally separate from TRICARE or any other civilian program. So you're welcome to keep using your VA benefits. And a lot of folks get their medications because it might be cheaper than using TRICARE.
Yeah. So I think that the big thing that you're, communicating there is, make sure you shop around and find the best value for your particular situation, because no two
Right.
people's situation is going to be the same, right? And I think that's an important kind of thing. So kind of to that end, you hit on a lot of things right there. You hit on the different types of plans and the different kinds of options, within the TRICARE umbrella. Can you talk to some of the bigger misconceptions that people come to you with? For example, hey, if I opt into, TRICARE option or plan, whatever, um, you know, I would assume that some people think that that's just a one and done, and they didn't ever have to think about it again. So yeah, if you kind of want to unpack some of that a little bit, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand the cost shares and maybe are unnecessarily afraid of TRICARE Select. That would be one misconception that I have
Yes.
seen. I'm a big fan of TRICARE Select. Personally, we've had it pretty much the entire time, except when we were stationed overseas, and it was, more difficult to have doctors on the economy. But um, and so people get afraid of having so much choice and afraid of the cost shares, et cetera. But honestly, if if you understand how it works, you can, kind of minimize the out of pocket costs. Of course, you're going to, you have to have the cost shares till you hit your catastrophic cap. But um, yeah, I found that people are so afraid of not seeing in-network doctors, and there's not really a need as long as the doctor is authorized. Sometimes my out-of-pocket costs are less than the cost share when I see an out-of-network doctor, because there's a set cost share for when you see someone who's in network, but it's a percentage when you're seeing someone who is a non-network provider. So sometimes that percentage comes out to less than the cost share. So it's just understanding the nuances of it, which admittedly is not always easy, but after a while you get the hang of it. I would also say that folks um, don't. One of the big misconceptions, and again, we're getting into the people that are uh, on the older retirees, I should say,
Yeah.
but people think you just have TRICARE for the rest of your life, and actually, despite what your recruiter may have told you, was a Supreme Court case. It was argued all the way up to the Supreme Court, and nope, you're not entitled to free health care for your entire life. At the age of 65, you age out of TRICARE and have to enroll in Medicare, and then you have TRICARE for life. So that's what another big misconception, that people don't know that that's going to happen. And kind of related to that, and this isn't strictly a military thing because everyone is subject to this, but Medicare costs are related to your modified adjusted gross income. So then this becomes a personal finance issue because,
Yeah.
a lot of military retirees, you got that military pension, you've got, civilian jobs. So a lot of folks are making a pretty high income. And if you didn't do some tax planning ahead of time, you might be shocked at what your Medicare premium could be, because it is based on your income, and you are, yeah.
So let me ask you one quick question, because you really kind of hit something in my mind there, on timing. So upon effective date of retirement, for example, or effective date of separation, those that are eligible to continue under the TRICARE umbrella, it's not automatic, right? There's, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's steps that a member has to take to ensure that they're covered as of that date going forward, right?
Yes. And this is complicated by the fact that whether or not you are able to enroll in healthcare as a retiree is going to be dependent upon whether DEERS, the database that keeps all of our data, um, whether DEERS knows that you've retired. And that depends on if your service branch
Right.
actually filed the paperwork in a timely manner. So theoretically speaking, yes, you're supposed to enroll in healthcare within 90 days, but unfortunately, a lot of folks may see a delay because you cannot call the contractor and enroll in TRICARE Select or whatever, TRICARE Select and on TRICARE East until that database knows that you've actually retired. But not to fear, you even if it takes a little while for you to show up in the database, you can retroactively enroll, and you would have your you might have to pay out of pocket and recoup the costs later. But you have about it's technically it's a year. I mean, they want you to enroll in 90 days, but if there was some terrible thing where you couldn't because your branch messed it up completely and didn't have you in the system as being retired. But in an ideal world, yes, on Friday you'd retire from active duty, and the next day you wouldn't even want the weekend, right, to not be covered.
Right.
You'd have
Bubble
coverage
wrap
the next
yourself
day
as you go out.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it is it, and people don't realize that they do have to do that. And they also, depending on the plan you pick, there are costs. It used to be free, but then a few years ago, they instituted, I think it was 2021, they instituted a cost for the TRICARE Select retirees. So there is something that you have to pay or you'll be dropped. And we've had, unfortunately, a few folks who don't take action. And then every year there's an open season in the fall. It's typically the last couple weeks of November and the first 2 weeks of December, where you can make changes to your plan if you really, decide you don't want to be on Prime anymore and you want to go to Select or, vice versa. Then that's when you can make your decision. But yes, people aren't used to having to take action, and unfortunately, there's a lot of inertia involved. So people don't.
Well, and they have to make elections now for vision and dental now, which weren't normally included, at least for the member, while in uniform.
Right. And a lot of folks, don't understand that, and that has the same open season. And so in order to, if you don't make that selection when you retire, then you'd have to wait for the next open season. So it's unless you have a qualifying life event, which is an insurance term for having some kind of big change, like moving or getting married or divorced or having a baby or something like that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
And I think those are, when we've talked on other episodes about decision-making, the fact that at the time of separation, at time of retirement, there are so many decisions to be made. And then the healthcare is one of the ones that's like layered, right? Because as Ian mentioned, not only do we have the TRICARE option, but you potentially have employee-sponsored plans. And then you've got dental and vision.
Right.
It's a lot of decision-making, and it's a lot of prepping your family for those decisions too. Like we've already, it's been a year since Ian's retired, and we still are reminding our daughters how vision and dental because it's a new system and we're all kind of getting used to it.
Right.
Even with our new civilian doctor, we're getting used to their procedures and things like that. And we're still, because this is the first time we've used Select. And so we're still navigating this too. There are just a lot of questions and decisions. So for my last question, I feel like we've already kind of hit all of these things, but you look through, with your lens personally, right? You're a veteran, you're a military spouse, you're a financial professional. You have these 3 different lenses that you look through all of this with. Obviously, this is the space you work in as well. But, what are tips you would give to those getting ready to separate? What are the tips you're going to remember when, this is a reality for you in 2 years, things you might prioritize that we haven't maybe mentioned already?
Well, I mean, in general, I would prioritize healthcare. I think a lot of times it takes a back seat, but it does require some planning. I mean, for example, we're not sure that we would stay in the area if we're going to retire. So I would probably start trying to, wherever we decide we're going to be, I'm going to start looking at healthcare systems ahead of time. I want to make sure that I'm going somewhere where we can get care. I don't want to have it doesn't have to necessarily be at a military treatment facility, but I want there to be options there, both maybe for the VA for Jared and for, actually I could go to the VA too. I haven't, but I could. But I want there to be options. And so I want to plan in advance. I probably would even try to figure out what providers we would try to see in any area we were going to move to. And even if you were retiring in the same area, as you brought up, you can't continue necessarily with your same PCM. If you were on Prime, even if you're on a Prime as a retiree, you might get reassigned, especially if you were being seen at a military treatment facility. So I would probably, I highly prioritize healthcare, because I think that, at the end of the day, you can't, money can buy you a lot of things, but your health is so important. So I would prioritize kind of scoping out the lay of the land first. That's what we're going to do. And I'm actually excited for the transition, because I really feel like Jared has not gotten great healthcare from the military system these past few years. So I'm excited about having him be on select and being able to, have all his, issues seen to. So I am kind of excited about that aspect of transition for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think those are such great points, and I appreciate that. And I think, the more we look at all of this and consider our decisions, we've been really happy with the civilian healthcare. Ian does use a mix of VA and civilian healthcare as well, which we've heard from a lot of people that works out well. He's had some, different experiences. It's been a little bumpy at times, but again, this is a new space to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with things like prescriptions, when based off of my disability rating, I get all that free through the VA. So there's definitely some advantages to picking and choosing, as you mentioned, what's going to fit your situation best. And to kind of wrap this up before we get into, I think, the fun part of all this, really I think are two things. First, I think the big part that you really hit on in all of this in the last, almost half hour that we've been talking already, healthcare is complex. And I think that, that we certainly have an opportunity to, in the future, invite you back on, and I'll preemptively throw that out there to maybe kind of do a deep dive into a certain aspect of it, perhaps. But I think the other part that you really hit on that I really appreciated is the fact that healthcare is a layer of your greater, I think, kind of picture of how you're going to live that next chapter. It's a the next tour. Yeah, that you're going to go. Yeah, well played there.
See what you did there.
Policeman. But, from a financial perspective, a tax implication perspective, an availability perspective, and as your health needs change, I think getting in there and reevaluating that periodically as part of your greater, financial health perspective. And I really like that that's part of, wrapped up into your job jar is how it all blends together. And I really think that is an incredible thing that you bring to bear. So Lila, thank you so very much for all the info, insight, and we look forward to certainly doing this again. Okay, so transitioning into the fun part of all this, my question is part of the game we call What's in Your Rucksack? So I'm going to offer that you get the opportunity to answer this in two different lenses. One, your own rucksack from your service, or from the rucksack that you collectively carry as the family, and how you're going to use that as you transition as a family in a couple of years. So the first part is, if there is one item that you would carry with you from service into civilian life or into that next tour as, Team Quintiliani moves on in a couple of years, what would that be? And then the second part is, what would you leave behind and why?
So when I was thinking about this, oddly, the two things are kind of like the yin and the yang to one another. So the thing that I would hope that I could keep is being incredibly flexible and able to pivot whatever the situation is. I'm like the fixer, I can, like the situation we were discussing before we started recording today, where I had a kid that was trapped by a snowstorm and an ice storm and couldn't get back to college. And so I tried all these other, avenues of getting her there. And we ended up finding a train, which I never even knew existed, that got down to Florida on time. And I've had to do that so many times, like, oh, we're going to PCS to this location. And no, nope, now we're going to PCS there, And I've had to be so flexible and have these kind of, mad planning skills that, can fix all these problems. But on the flip side, what I'd like to leave behind would be the incredible uncertainty and never being able to, lay down roots or have like a very consistent plan and be able to plan like my vacation in, whatever months. I mean, I can have a tentative plan, but I always have to have insurance and, or
Sure.
or a
Always have a
refundable
backup plan.
reservation.
Yeah.
Because we've had that happen where just leave gets canceled or you just can't go. And I'd love to be able to have a little bit more certainty in life. So I'd like to leave behind the uncertainty a little bit.
Oh, no, excellent answers. And you know what? It has, as we sit here and listen, I mean, I'll speak for Andy on this one too. We agree.
Yeah.
I think those perspectives are spot on. And I would anticipate that so many other people feel that exactly the same. Really appreciate that, Lila.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so very true. Yeah. Like Ian said. Okay, so this brings us to our next game called Two Truths and a Lie, Military Style. So on our last episode 3, we had our friend Jason Metzger on, and he gave us his 2 truths and a lie. So you get to try to figure out which one is the lie. So number 1 was he did airborne jumps into 6 different countries. He listed them on the podcast. I'm not going to do that now. 2, he flew in a Black Hawk to a Toby Keith concert in Iraq. And number 3, he was accepted into the FBI as a captain, but declined. Which is the lie?
I'm going to say the FBI one.
Ooh, you are correct.
Yeah.
Oh, very well done.
So I'll spill the beans on that one, on why that one was the lie. He actually didn't make it into the acceptance stage. He ended up declining out of it before he got to that point. So excellent guest. Yes, he's a master parachutist. He has jumped all over the world. And in his multiple tours in the Mideast, he did end up getting to fly on a Black Hawk to go see Toby Keith. How cool is that? Yeah. So all these crazy experiences for members and families that we get to do all around the world, I think really highlights that 2 truths and a lie military style. So excellent guest.
All right, now it's your turn. So Lila, what are your 2 truths and a lie? And we will reveal this on our next episode. So no one gets to know what it is. They just have to see.
Exciting. What do we got?
Okay. So during a field problem at CMTC, that's the Combat Maneuver Training Center in Germany and in Hohenfels, I had a wild boar eat my MRE.
Okay.
And it was a chicken a la king MRE.
Oh, one of the good ones.
Yeah. And then the next one is I drove my car, not a military vehicle, through a minefield in Croatia.
Oh, also plausible. Okay. All right.
Hoping not true.
That's scary.
And then the last one is I was a platoon leader for an all-male recon platoon back in the 90s.
Oh.
Wow. Like Ian said,
Yeah,
all
plausible. Well, we are excited to reveal what that is on our next episode. So to that end, I don't know if you wanted to wrap things up.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Yeah.
So Lila, it was so fantastic to have you today. We really appreciate it. And like Ian said, we will probably invite you back. We would really like to ask our viewers and listeners to, throw some questions at us that maybe we want to dig deeper into on another episode. You haven't agreed to that, but I think might convince you to do that. But I
say yes. Say yes. Say yes.
There are a lot of questions to be asked here, and hopefully this got people's, juices flowing about things that they need to consider for their own family, consider next open season or something like that as well. So Thank you so much for being here with us on the next tour.
Yes. And also, thank you for color coordinating with us.
I
see
know.
we're
I
all
was
wearing the same
gonna
color.
say something. We didn't even plan it. That's great. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's my pleasure. It's fun to nerd out over these kind of things.
Definitely. Well, it's a very needed, I think, platform to be able to talk about these things and get them out in the open. The more you know, the more you grow. So whatever, throw a euphemism at it. Love it. All right. Thanks again, Lila. We'll see you next time.
The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, Andia, or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.